Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Wilderness Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rob Minturn, physical therapist, strength and conditioning specialist, owner and founder of the Fitness Institute. Hope you guys are having a great Thursday. I just had some moose walk through the backyard. I heard the neighbors' dogs barking. They always bark, but for whatever reason, I looked this time and there was a cow and a calf walking through our backyard this morning. So that was pretty cool. While I was drinking coffee and getting this podcast put together this morning. Um, Today, we're going to be talking about when sex feels like a crown of thorns. More often than not, like in my screening questions with especially women coming in with low back pain and hip pain, I ask a couple or ask several pelvic floor screening questions. And one of them is, do you have pain with sex or pain with insertion of any kind? And more often than not, the answer is typically no, but sometimes it has been yes. And when it is yes, even a more select group have said that it feels like a crown of thorns. So I wanted to dive into that because that was a very descriptive way to put it. So I wanted to dive into that a little bit, and so I dug up some information, and I wanted to bring that to you guys. So what does this mean? So when sex feels like a crown of thorns, there's a couple different a couple different reasons, a couple different causes, and then some things that you can do about it. So, upon insertion, though, it can be a tampon, it can be sex. Upon insertion or with deeper penetration, some clients have described sex or intimacy as this, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Some women have pain upon initial insertion. Some women have pain upon deeper penetration. So it kind of depends on what physiologically is going on. Some of the causes, there's physiologically, there's tearing. There can be vaginal tearing at birth. Sometimes women need to have it sewn up. Sometimes I think it's a 4-point graded scale. So I think the first two, there doesn't need to be any sort of medical intervention. I think the second two, the grades 3 and 4, there needs to be some sort of uh, medical intervention, some sort of sewing to repair that, to allow the healing to happen. But that can cause pain with sex. Um, Also, surgery, like with hysterectomies, depending on how they have to go in and take out the uterus, that can also cause pain with sex afterwards as well. And then psychological causes. Was there physical abuse or sexual abuse at some point in your life? That can also have an influence on your sexual experience and whether or not you have pain with sex. So, what are some things that you can do about it? So there's a whole list I put together. I think it's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight things that you can do, or eight things to consider. So we're going to dive into those because there's quite a bit to unpack here. So desensitization. So what desensitization is, and with any sort of surgery, we do this in therapy. What happens when you have surgery, and this can happen like even if you don't have surgery, right? But just desensitization overall is when the nervous system in that particular area is heightened. So we have this baseline. If you're watching this on Instagram, the replay or live, or you're watching this on YouTube, we have this baseline threshold to where our skin receptors don't send signals back to our brain. So you have this threshold here, and so you can lie underneath this baseline area and not send signals back to your brain. But as soon as something like you put on a new pair of jeans that were air dried and they're crusty, you're gonna feel like it's gonna send some signals back. Your brain's gonna be like, all right, this is not a response that I need to know anymore. So it's gonna chill it back out to that baseline. When we have surgery or when there's an injury in the area, the nervous system becomes sensitized. So that baseline threshold is going to be risen up a little bit. So now it's less of a response, less of a stimulus that sends a signal back to our brain. Um, we do desensitization to overstimulate that area to then bring it back down to that baseline where you have more wiggle room to then feel things and not have some sort of like pain response or some sort of negative response to that. So some desensitization techniques are, we're going to start with the breathing and stimulating the vagus nerve. So you want to do the breathing exercises before you pretty much do the rest of these other these other desensitization or these other techniques, because this is going to set the foundation. This is going to set the base to help chill you out before you do some of these other things. All right. So, one, while you're eating, this is something that you don't necessarily have to eat before you do the rest of these, but this was a little fun fact. While you're eating, chew your food at least 10 times before you swallow. It's really going to make you slow down. Evidently that stimulates the vagus nerve. I trust the source that I got this from. I take all my most of my CEUs, these guys, so I trust the source. I did not know that, but yeah, chewing your food 10 times before you swallow helps stimulate that vagus nerve, that rest and digest response. Humming and gargling water, that can help stimulate that vagus nerve. And then physiological sigh. So it's a double inhale with a longer exhale. It's the double inhales through the nose, the longer exhales through the mouth. If I think I talked about this, not the physiological sigh, but breathing techniques on a different podcast. I think it was episode 36. I could be wrong. I don't know what it is, but it's breathing for mountain performance or belly breathing for mountain performance. Um, because we talk about diaphragmatic breathing versus chest breathing. A lot of folks use their chest to breathe, especially if they're dealing with pain. But the diaphragm should be the main driver of our breathing. And when you use the diaphragm for breathing, your belly should be moving, I say, twice as much as the ribs. The diaphragm should be responsible for moving the ribs. The ribs should not be responsible for moving the diaphragm. So you want to feel your belly move more than your chest as you're breathing. If you're having issues with that, go to that podcast earlier on, and I walk you through an exercise to do that. But with the physiological sigh, the double inhale is a normal breath through the nose. Again, using your belly, so you're going to breathe in and then breathe out. Okay, so you breathe in a normal amount, and then you take a second inhale to reinflate those lungs, and then you're going to take that longer exhale out through the mouth. Okay. If you want to pause the podcast and do that 2 or 3 times now, you can certainly do that. If you're driving or sitting at your desk at work, you can certainly do that. And then that's going to stimulate that vagus nerve to help you chill out a little bit. Okay. The second thing, so once you've done that, the second thing is going to be a vaginal dilator. So what that is a tool. You put it in your vagina and you can choose how far the tool opens up. And what that's going to do, it's going to help desensitize the area to, one, get used to something going in, two, the opening, right? So you might only be able to stick the tool in. There are some women that can't even do that. So, but you can take a look at that. And then as you get more used to it, as that response chills out and as things start to feel more normalized, you can open up that dilator a little bit more and more. And that's going to get you used to tampons or any sort of intimacy going inside. All right. This is another tool that's used to help with birth prep as well, because obviously you're going to be pushing a baby out, and that babies can be huge. So that's the vaginal dilator is another way to help desensitize the area and help stretch that area out for birth prep. Um, another desensitization is self-pleasure. Start externally and then move internally, right? And then working with a sex therapist, sometimes you might not know the tools or some other ways for external and internal pleasure. So talking with a sex therapist may be something that you want to be interested, or maybe something that would be beneficial for you to dive into, as they probably have a library of tools and things that you can use to be successful with those. And then with the self-pleasure, semi-recline position, just the position that puts your body in, it's going to help things relax as well. So it can help that experience be a little more enjoyable. Let's see, I wanted to talk. Oh, with the self-pleasure piece. The reason this is important, especially after, like, if you gave birth or you had a surgery or anything like that, if you don't know what you like after any sort of event, traumatic event, whether it's a hysterectomy, traumatic birth, vaginal birth, if you don't know what you like, it's very hard for your partner to figure that out, right? You're both on a figuring out process, and you're trying to do that when you're trying to be intimate. So taking the time to figure it out yourself might not be something that you had done before, but it certainly would be an investment worth your time to figure out what you enjoy doing yourself. So that way, when it comes time for you and your partner to do things, you can guide them through that. So that way there's not frustration with intimacy. So a little fact about that too. Like figure it out yourself after some sort of vaginal birth or a hysterectomy, anything like that, where you're having issues, so that way you can guide your partner through what you like. The last little bit of desensitization is some mirror feedback or imagery of insertion. Mirror feedback, so you're literally like sitting with a mirror, and most folks are not going to be too fond of that. But sitting with a mirror and going through like just massaging the area, touching the area, and seeing that for whatever reason, that helps the brain realize that, hey, this is not a threatening response. This is not a threatening stimulus. It's okay. I don't have to send a pain signal down from the brain to the area to protect the area. Most women are not going to be too fond of that. You can try it out. If it doesn't really work for you because you're in your head, that's totally cool. Looking up images of insertion and imagery of insertion. So basically watching that happen. See if you have a painful response. Does your brain just associate insertion of things to pain? If that's the case, then that's a brain retraining thing to retrain the brain that, hey, just like watching it is not a should not be a painful response for someone. We use this like the mirror feedback and the imagery of things in therapy with someone like after an amputation, um, or someone with like chronic pain to retrain the brain, because there's different parts of the brain that get activated with pain. And some of these parts just may be overactivated, maybe over responding, overreacting because of the fact that there was possibly trauma in the area through birth, through surgery, through abuse, anything like that. So those two things would be beneficial as well. Manual therapy. So if you're going to see a therapist, we're going to see massage therapists, soft tissue work on your glutes, specifically the obturator internus. That would be another great muscle to address. Your physical therapist or your massage therapist should know where that is at. It's basically along, like you find the tailbone or the sitting bones, you find the butt bones, and then you drop off of that a little bit and to the inside towards your butt crack. So it's in a pretty sensitive spot, but that is something that I'm actually working with someone right now dealing with some issues with that. It's very sensitive. So we're doing some trigger point release and some strengthening of that area to help chill that out. All right. So strength training is another thing that you can do. Strength training, not just of your pelvic floor, but of your groin and your abdominals, right? And that because you want to strengthen above and below the problem area because there's likely underlying weaknesses in those areas to that are contributing to the fact that that pelvic floor has to have a little excessive tension to it. So if you get those other muscle groups around the pelvic floor stronger, then the pelvic floor can go back to doing its job instead of working overtime to compensate for the lack that your groin or your abdominals are weak. Okay. Creams. So I'm going to butcher this pronouncing, but Termiva cream and estrogen cream. If you're not talking with an OB and you're having issues, you should definitely get an OB on your team. But these two creams, if you bring these up to them, they're going to know exactly what you're talking about. That can help reduce any sort of, or can help reduce sensitivity with insertion. Activity modifications. So going to the bathroom, squatty potty. That position that having your feet up like that puts your pelvis in, it will help reduce the tension in your pelvic floor. Again, you're looking for things like think of this like a checking account. If you're doing things and you're constantly withdrawing checks, at some point you're gonna go into a negative balance. You're gonna have a check bounce, but you want to do things that you're depositing checks, right? So if you're strength training your abdominals, you're strength training your groin, you're strength training your glutes, your pelvic floor, those are all depositing checks. If you're using the squatty potty, that's depositing a check, right? So when you have to go write those checks, there's enough balance in your checking account to where it's not going to be an issue. Another activity modification is power peeing. So a lot of women don't know what that is, but when you sit down, and guys do this too, but when you sit down and go to the bathroom, you're pushing out your urine. Going to the bathroom should be a relaxing experience. It should not be a like I have 2 seconds to pee. You should be peeing for 6 to 8 seconds, 7 to 8 seconds. So be mindful of are you power peeing or not? If you are, then you've got to retrain your brain to when you sit down, you relax, maybe do some of that physiological, or yeah, what did I call it? The physiological side to help stimulate that vagus nerve, and then you go to the bathroom. Proprioception. So a lot of time, like if there's trauma to the area, the brain and the nerves and the muscles sometimes have a difficult time communicating, and that difficult time communicating can last forever if there's not rehab for it. So I'll use the house game with folks, men and women. The basement, like you have the basement, you have the main level, and then the attic. The basement is you're pushing out, like you're bearing down, or you're trying to push something out of your vagina, I guess, in terms of women. Main level is everything is relaxed. Attic is you're doing a Kegel and contracting up, like you're trying to go up into the attic, right? So you have the attic that's contracting the pelvic floor, drawing up and away. You have the main level, everything is relaxed, and then you have the basement where you're pushing something out. Okay. And then trauma, as in terms of trauma, like resolving your trauma, working with a mental health therapist. That's probably one of the hardest things to do is rehabbing your brain because it's a fairly new thing, especially in the United States. It's taboo. Sometimes it's like talking about sex and talking about all that stuff, right? It's taboo to admit that something is going on, and it can be very hard to admit something is going on. But if you're having issues and you've numbed things out, that can also lead to difficulty with sex and difficulty with insertion. So, talking with a mental health therapist is going to be beneficial for you. If you have not read The Body Keeps the Score, that is an excellent book for you to read. I know I mentioned it, I think a month ago when I did the leaking podcast. So, take a look at that book. I promise I will. I've made a note to link that in the show notes, so I will link that in the show notes. Psychology Today, EMDR. Sorry, if you go into the mental health therapist route and you want to work with someone online because you had an experience before where you went into someone, they took a different job, you couldn't follow them, and you didn't feel like opening up to another therapist, maybe working working with someone online is going to be beneficial for you because they're not necessarily going to be changing job locations like they're going to be online. If you do that, psychologytoday.com is a great place to go. It's a site that was recommended to me to give to you all. EMDR, like you can click check boxes and have these check boxes clicked so that way your therapist is certified in these. EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. There are certain ways that your eyes move that when you have a traumatic response, to something, to whether it's something someone said or something that someone did, your eyes move in a certain way. So they can help teach you how to redo that. And then internal family systems, IFS. So make sure your therapist has one or both of these, and they'll be a good fit for you. And then sleep. The last thing is getting adequate sleep and getting a good quality sleep. The quality sleep being the number one thing. Pain response to sleep. There has been research done that in subjects that got less than the 7.5 hours of sleep, they had an increase in 2 points on a 10-point scale. So 0 to 10 scale, they had an increase of on average of 2 points on that scale compared to those who were getting 7.5 hours of sleep. So pretty interesting stuff in sleep and pain. So make sure you're getting good quality sleep. You're not drinking before bed. Limit alcohol use like 1 to 2 drinks a week, which is going to sound crazy, but that's okay. I'm a little crazy. But get good quality sleep, and that will help start to get you on the path in the right direction in terms of your pain response too. Okay. Clinical bottom line. So sex and insertion should not be something you have to mentally prep for or dread with your partner because of how it feels. It doesn't have to be painful. There is a way to get to the point where it's actually an activity to look forward to without being a chore on the to-do list to prep for because of all the steps that you need to take. The process of getting there may not be too enjoyable, but I think the juice would be worth a squeeze in terms of being able to get back to using a tampon again without pain, in terms of being able to be intimate with your partner again without pain or having to be in your head and worrying about it. So I think that juice would definitely be worth a squeeze. All right, guys, subscribe to the podcast. If you enjoy this episode, subscribe to the podcast. That's all I asked this week. And if you found it helpful, I guess share it with a friend, share it with share it with friends, share it with a family member, but definitely subscribe to the podcast so that way you guys don't miss another episode. But you guys have a great rest of your week. Happy Thursday. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll catch you next week. Peace.